Reality's Magicians, the Substrate Directive. Episode 1, Shadows in the Fabric. Julian Cross leaned back in his chair, an unassuming piece of ergonomic plastic that squeaked under his weight. The room, windowless and secured behind multiple biometric locks, was lit by only the dull overhead fluorescence. Julian stared at the lines of code running across his screen, trying to quell the gnawing sense of anticipation that had haunted him since last night. Across the metal table, Ebony Cartry, the mathematician he had corresponded with for the past 6 months, fidgeted with her pen. "This is the entire data set we got from the collider results," Ebony said, turning her laptop so Julian could see the screen. "Something's off. The normal distribution isn't quite normal." Julian nodded, wiping his forehead. He was a quantum physicist by training, with a specialty in quantum error correction theories. He had once believed wholeheartedly in the standard model of particle physics, but Ebony's curated data set from the newly constructed elliptical collider in the Swiss Alps hinted at something beyond the standard model, maybe even beyond quantum field theory. He swallowed, remembering how the data was first introduced to him. 3 months earlier, a quiet man in a tailored suit approached Julian at a conference on quantum computing in Berlin. The man's card simply read, Venko, Directorate S. Venko had said the Directorate was a quasi-governmental, clandestine think tank, one that sought to push the boundaries of fundamental science. The official reason for the conversation was that they needed an expert in quantum error correcting codes. The real reason, as Venko had later disclosed, was far more provocative. They believed the universe itself was a hyperdimensional lattice of information. In other words, reality might be shaped by a code more fundamental than anything conventional physics had dreamed of. Ebony's presence in this underground lab near Lake Geneva testified to how serious that notion had become. She was the best mathematician Julian knew, and she had a secret resume. Ebony had done parallel work on group theoretic structures that described holographic principles. Coupled with certain topological breakthroughs, she was the perfect partner for analyzing data that defied standard predictions. The data in question wasn't from everyday experiments. It came from a highly classified project that not even the European Organization for Nuclear Research was aware of. In the dim overhead light, Ebony's expression was grave. "Look at this part," she said. Her finger hovered over the laptop screen. "We have a series of collisions that, by all accounts, should have produced symmetrical patterns of decay. Instead, they produced prime number sequences in the data logs. The only logical explanation is that we're seeing emergent computational patterns, patterns that correlate to code." Julian took a slow breath, examining the wave function collapses plotted on Ebony's screen. "And you think this prime sequence is inherent to how the collisions are shaped by the underlying fabric of space-time?" "That's precisely my guess," she replied. "If matter is fundamentally informational, then maybe we're seeing tiny segments of that universal code in the collision readouts." The potential ramifications made Julian's head spin. If Ebony was correct, if these collisions let them peek at the code that underpins reality, then the entire edifice of physical law was about to get turned upside down. It would be akin to discovering the double helix structure of DNA all over again, but at a cosmic scale. DNA had revolutionized biology. This new code, if harnessed, could do the same for the entire universe. A revelation in the archive. The door to the lab whooshed open, and a tall, bespectacled figure walked in. Dr. Chen Xiaomi, the facility's liaison to the Collider project, brushed aside her sleek black hair and made direct eye contact with Ebony. "We just got word from the head office," she said. "They want us to run more analyses on the dataset. Venko's superiors are requesting a deeper infiltration of the pattern. They suspect it extends beyond prime sequences." Ebony rubbed her temples. "Then we'll need more computing power. The arrays I was using are maxed out, even with quantum acceleration. The patterns are unbelievably complex." "That can be arranged," Chen said, her voice taut. "But there's a catch. We're not the only ones who suspect an underlying code. I've intercepted chatter that certain rogue organizations are making inquiries about our data. They might be trying to replicate the experiments themselves. Julian felt a bead of sweat roll down his neck. He'd heard of these rogue organizations. Whispers in the scientific underground claimed that there existed a group, its membership rumored to be ex-military cryptographers, quantum hackers, and mathematicians, who believed they could harness the code to manipulate reality. Some even called them reality's magicians. The idea that matter could be hacked like a piece of software led to dangerous fantasies of shape-shifting, rewriting one's own biology, or worse. If they got hold of Ebony's data, chaos was guaranteed. "Let's stick to the plan," Julian said. "Let's isolate the prime sequences and see if we can build a computational model around them. Ebony, you lead the math. I'll assist with the quantum logic. Chen, you handle the security." Chen nodded. "Yes, but there's more. We're to meet with Venko in 48 hours in Zurich. Something about a big reveal. They've been pushing for a clandestine meeting in an air-gapped facility." "A big reveal?" Ebony asked. "It must be urgent." Chen's eyes flickered. "He said he has reason to believe our data only scratches the surface. There's another source of confirmation. Symphony of bit strings." Within an hour, Ebony and Julian sat in front of a complex network of quantum computers that hummed quietly within a sealed vault. The machine's superconducting circuits were cooled to near absolute zero, enabling them to process vast quantities of data in parallel. Ebony typed lines of advanced code that leveraged topological qubits, while Julian monitored the system's error correction thresholds. As Ebony compiled the results, lines of color-coded output scrolled across a large projection screen. Each line represented a snippet of data from the collider's exotic collisions. When processed through Ebony's prime factorization algorithms, certain lines lit up in neon green, indicating potential hits that correlated with universal constants. Others glowed purple, signifying anomalies. The buzz in Julian's mind grew with each anomaly. He recalled that DNA sequences, once unraveled, had led to technologies that could manipulate the genome. If these prime-coded anomalies were truly a DNA of reality, the potential for rewriting the laws of physics themselves was on the table. Could they, in theory, rearrange the cosmic code to cure diseases instantly, reshape physical objects, shift entire timeline outcomes? It sounded like science fiction, but Ebony's data wasn't lying. "It's like the entire physical universe is a phone's display," Ebony said, paraphrasing a metaphor they had heard repeatedly from Venko. "People see the icons, swipe the screen, but have no idea of the code and circuits underneath. We're digging under the operating system to see how it's all written. Terrifying, really." Julian nodded. "The question is, how deep does it go? Are we looking at the quantum foam or something even more fundamental, like a hyperdimensional substrate that encodes consciousness?" Ebony's gaze was distant. "We might be stepping into territory we can't fully comprehend yet." Moments later, the quantum computer beeped, indicating it had finished the primary data run. A progress bar on Ebony's laptop soared to 100%. Then, an automated voice said, "Computation complete. Prime sequences identified." She tapped a key to open the results. What they saw made them both freeze in place. The hidden signature. The prime sequences Ebony had identified weren't random. They formed a fractal pattern reminiscent of the Ulam spiral, but with extra layers of complexity that hinted at multi-dimensional geometry. The distribution matched no known closed-form expression or function from standard mathematics. Furthermore, the prime fractals repeated at intervals that precisely aligned with the measured Planck time increments in the collider, almost as though the code was beating like a cosmic heart. But the kicker was the labeling. Near the end of the data readout was a signature, a string of integers that repeated 4202119 Ebony frowned at it. Julian recognized it from an obscure cryptography puzzle. He had once read a declassified paper suggesting that 42,021,193 was a prime used as part of a top-secret cryptographic system in a black-budget project, a system rumored to revolve around the manipulation of universal constants, the code name Meridian. Julian's eyes flitted to Ebony's. "You see it too, right? The signature?" She nodded slowly. "Meridian. The rumor. The Black Project. The one allegedly run by your friend Venko's directorate." He swallowed. "I never told you, but Venko mentioned Meridian as if it were some next-level quantum infiltration program. Something that could break any encryption by tapping into zero-point energy states. But if the same prime number is appearing in our experiment's data, that suggests Meridian is more than just a cryptographic effort. It might be the tip of an iceberg, an attempt to decode reality itself. If so, we're entangled in it now." Ebony exhaled, tension etched in her features. "That means we're not just working for the directorate. We might be replicating or continuing the Meridian project, and that puts a target on our backs." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ebony shook her head and said, "We have 48 hours before that meeting with Venko. Let's refine our analysis and ensure we understand the signature in context. Whatever's going on, we need to be prepared." Unsettling echoes. That night, Julian tried to sleep in a tiny dormitory-like room on the facility's sublevel. His mind wouldn't stop spinning. The corridor outside his door was eerily silent, punctuated only by the hum of ventilation. Dark thoughts flooded him. If Meridian was real, had the code behind reality already been partially mapped out? Could that be how the clandestine group, rumored to be reality's magicians, was performing impossible acts? Julian recalled a half-forgotten story about a lab accident in which an entire test subject's physiology was allegedly altered using an informational wave manipulator. The details were murky, possibly disinformation, but if true, that was precisely the kind of reality hacking that would cause global havoc. He drifted off into uneasy dreams of glowing fractals and voices whispering in prime sequences as though coaxing him to rewrite existence itself. Dispatches from a deeper mind. At dawn, Ebony found him in the cafeteria, sipping burnt coffee. She looked exhausted but resolute. "I kept working through the night," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I used some unsanctioned computing resources to test a hypothesis." Julian looked concerned. "Unsanctioned?" She shrugged. "I spun up a hidden instance on the mainframe. I had to. Something was telling me to check if the prime-coded collisions produce an effect in the quantum vacuum. I ran a series of advanced simulations, factoring in hypothetical manipulations of the data." "And?" She glanced around, ensuring no one was eavesdropping. "The code pattern can be manipulated. I inserted a subroutine that effectively changed certain integer sequences by transposing them, just like you'd transpose notes in music. The simulation indicated that such transpositions might change the local vacuum state. In theory, you can alter how fundamental particles manifest in certain experiments." Julian's pulse quickened. "Meaning you can rewrite physical outcomes by altering the code?" She nodded. "Yes, in the simulation. If it's correct, then with real-time access to collisions and the right coding interface, you could create localized reality shifts. Possibly small at first, like adjusting the spin of an electron, but theoretically larger manipulations, potentially biological, maybe macro-scale objects. This is a big deal, Julian." He set down his coffee mug, the handle rattling against the cheap plastic tray. "We're stepping into territory that could literally reshape the world. If we can figure this out, so can others." "Exactly." Ebony stood. "We need to talk to Venko. But let's be ready for anything." The rendezvous in Zurich. 2 days later, Ebony, Julian, and Chen traveled in an inconspicuous black SUV to a nondescript building in the outskirts of Zurich. The building's facade was an old insurance office, but the reality was a covert Directorate S site. Inside, security was tight. Armed guards, hidden cameras, and more biometric scanners. They were ushered into a windowless briefing room where Venko waited. He was slender, with a calm demeanor. The only sign of tension was the slight tapping of his leather-gloved fingertips on the steel table. He greeted them in a hushed voice. "I trust you have the data," he said, peering at Ebony with an intensity that made her uneasy. She nodded. "Yes, and we found something. A prime-coded pattern, fractal in nature. We also uncovered references to Meridian. Care to enlighten us?" Venko's eyes flickered with what might have been pride or fear. "You were told about Meridian," Julian answered. "We recognized the prime signature, so it's real." Venko nodded slowly. Meridian started as a post-quantum cryptography project, but its scope expanded when we discovered that reality might be described by an algorithmic code. For the last decade, the Directorate has funded hush-hush experiments on the zero-point field. We used large-scale quantum computers to parse anomalies in cosmic background radiation, searching for signs of informational structure. We eventually found those prime-coded sequences, the same you see in your collider data. We realized we were glimpsing the universal source code. We called it the substrate. Chen cast a sidelong glance. "And if you decode the substrate completely?" Venko's lips twitched into something like a smile. "You would gain the power to rewrite the rules of physics. We call this phenomenon transpositional editing. You can shift reality states by modifying the code that underlies them. We're talking about illusions that aren't illusions at all, but actual changes in the fabric of existence. The potential is limitless. So are the dangers." Ebony folded her arms. "So the rumors about reality's magicians, a rogue group that can do the impossible, are true." Venko sighed. "They have part of the code, enough to cause small-scale chaos, rewriting local fields, biological augmentations, messing with perceptions. They want the rest, or at least a bigger chunk. If they get it, civilization as we know it could be undone." "And how far along are they?" Ebony asked. "Hard to say, but it's a race. That's why the Directorate is pouring resources into your Collider project. We need the final piece of the substrate's puzzle. We suspect the code is self-similar at multiple scales. Understand the subatomic collisions, and you can extrapolate to cosmic scales and to consciousness." Julian felt a cold sweat. What does this have to do with consciousness exactly? Venko steepled his fingers. "We suspect consciousness arises from the interplay of topological structures in the substrate. It's not an accident or emergent property of matter alone. It's embedded in the code. If we fully decode it, we might learn to rewrite not just physical reality, but mental and spiritual reality too." A charged silence filled the room. They were on the cusp of knowledge that could upend existence in unimaginable ways. Ebony tried to keep her voice steady. "So what's our next move?" Venko looked at them each in turn. "Find the missing piece, the fraction of code that merges prime fractals with the conscious observer effect. Then come back here. But do it quietly. We suspect the magicians have infiltrated multiple labs. If you get this piece, we can lock it away, forever, or until we know how to handle it responsibly." Julian's heart pounded as he realized the weight of the mission. This was no longer about a curiosity in data. This was about cosmic code, consciousness, and the power to mold reality. The question was, who could be trusted to wield such power? A curtain parted. An hour later, they left the building and stepped into the crisp Swiss air. Their driver took them back to the lab near Lake Geneva. Silence reigned until Ebony broke it. "This is bigger than we imagined. The real question is, do we want to hand the final piece over to Venko's Directorate, or do we keep it safe ourselves?" Chen answered grimly. "Either we trust an official group that might at least have protocols, or we risk that a rogue cell could blow the hinges off reality. There's no easy answer." Julian glanced out the window at the serene landscape passing by. "Either way, once we gather that puzzle piece, we'll be holding the blueprint of existence in our hands. and that might make us the biggest targets on Earth. The SUV sped onward, leaving Julian with an uneasy feeling that the subtle fractal code he'd glimpsed was whispering through every particle around them, even the air in the vehicle, the water molecules in his bloodstream, the neural firings in his brain. It was all one tapestry of logic, waiting to be read or rewritten. Their footsteps were already imprinted in it, and the next step could trigger either salvation or catastrophe. Such were the shadows in the fabric of reality.